Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. We've come together to learn about assessing Australia healthcare opportunities from discovery research to product development, partnerships in pharma, medical devices, and digital health. Australia is a country with a distinguished track record for health and medical research excellence, breakthroughs in genomic medicine, digital health, and precision medicine. And with these breakthroughs, it has impacted the world through discoveries such as electronic pacemaker, cochlear implant, and 3D human stem cell printing technology. The vibrant medical device and diagnostics industry has also evolved at a rapid rate with strong growth in digital health technologies and devices using advanced materials. Robotics designs and adaptive technology platforms are catalyzed by COVID-19 that has dramatically changed the world to reimagine healthcare systems and expand the reach of digital health solutions further and beyond than before. Anything from disease prevention to diagnosis and treatment. So today we're about to hear more about assessing Australia healthcare opportunities, the flexible regulatory regime, including intellectual property protection, tax incentives, research and development culture, and how the thriving healthcare ecosystem and healthcare precincts in respective Australian states and territories may favor you. We also have an inspiring story by Johnson & Johnson Innovation, a global multinational corporate player on the journey of growth and strategic healthcare partnership transformation in Australia. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Ms. Amelia Walsh, Trade and Investment Commissioner for Australia Trade and Investment, and Ms. Kathy Connell, Senior Director, External Innovation and Partnering for Australia and New Zealand at Johnson & Johnson Innovation. So over to you, Ms. Walsh, to take the audience through what you have in store for us this afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine. Thanks so much. And hi, everyone. I'm Amelia Walsh, Trade and Investment Commissioner with Austrade, based in Singapore. I'm really pleased to be here with our partners today, APAC Med and Johnson & Johnson. So if you don't know Austrade, or the Australian Trade and Investment Commission, we say the clue is in the title. The trade piece is about helping Australian companies into new markets or grow in existing markets. And the investment piece is about attracting productive FDI into Australia. So my job here today is to get you excited about opportunities in Australia in the healthcare space. And when we set out to do this work profiling the exciting healthcare sector in Australia for investors, we quickly realised there's far too many exciting innovation opportunities to cover in one session. So what we're attempting today is to just give you a taste, really whet your appetite, and then encourage you to follow up with our team and our state and territory colleagues about your specific interests with Australia. So today I'm going to give you an overview of Australian capability and opportunities, and then you'll hear from our state and territory colleagues about strengths in each jurisdiction. And when you've had enough of the government telling you how great the opportunities are, we'll welcome Kathy Connell from Johnson & Johnson to talk about her experience and J&J's experience with innovation in Australia. So really looking forward to that. So I'll start, as we all have to now, with an update on the COVID situation. So in Australia, apart from the lockdown in Melbourne last year, we had remained relatively open domestically with low COVID numbers until the Delta variant really picked up in winter, this Australian winter, so Southern Hemisphere winter. Depending on your age group, we've got the AstraZeneca and the Pfizer rolling out as vaccinations, and quite quickly in some jurisdictions. And of notable thanks to our Singaporean and UK government partners, we received some additional Pfizer vaccines in a dose swap deal recently. On numbers, we've had about 30 million doses of vaccine administered. Reminder, the population's 25 million. So we've got about just over 12 million people fully vaccinated, with that target of 80% in December in sight. And I think, the reason we're all so obsessed with these vaccine target numbers is that we know those rates are so important to the plans to open up the economy. Plans are underway to move through a phased approach to reduce quarantine, remove passenger limits, and open up our economy. And do be assured the government's working hard behind the scenes, all levels of government, so that when we tip over those herd immunity targets, our systems will be ready to talk to each other, recognise vaccine certificates, etc., and get you on planes to Australia to grow your business or maybe visit family, and perhaps next year, perhaps some tourism. So on the next slide, we'll just go into a bit of a high level around Australia. Prior to COVID-19, we'd enjoyed nearly 30 years of consecutive annual economic growth. Like with everyone, the pandemic has been tough on the economy, but the government contributed about 15% of GDP in direct economic support for individuals, households and businesses. And so what we saw early in this year, in 2021, was the economy rebounding quite well, and we see that as a positive signal for as we sort of work through the impacts of current lockdowns and moving out of the current situation. So I think also of interest on this slide is that Australia is one of the easiest places in the world to do business. And, I have to smile when I say that, being based in my fabulous host country of Singapore. So maybe we don't beat Singapore, but we do have an average time of just 2 days to register a business, and a really relatively straightforward process. We're also really multicultural. I think that's known about Australia. Maybe less well known is that about 30% of Australians are born overseas, and an even higher number has a parent born overseas. And so what does that mean for business? Well, it means, there's an extremely culturally diverse, multilingual population. We've got a highly skilled workforce, and that really has got advantages for developing your cross-border business. So on the next slide, thanks. We're really proud of our strong record of globally significant research breakthroughs. And Christine touched on a couple of them, but I think we've had spray on skin for burns treatment, the cochlear implant, which will be known to a number of you, cure for peptic ulcers, and fetal ultrasound invention. We're also really proud to say Gardasil, the world's first cervical cancer vaccine, and Relenza, an influenza treatment, were both developed in Australia. On the next slide, just to touch on the medical devices manufacturing sector. So it's quite significant, and you'll see a number of MNCs, some on this call as well, manufacturing in Australia. So we have AstraZeneca, Baxter, GSK, Merck and Pfizer. And one thing I'd just like to call out as well, when COVID hit, we saw something like 130 domestic manufacturing companies pivot to PPE production. And it was just a really fantastic demonstration of how agile the manufacturing sector could be. We also have a modern manufacturing initiative, which is a significant government investment into boosting up manufacturing in key sectors, including in healthcare, and significant mRNA sector in Victoria, which you'll hear about from Victoria a little bit later. So on the next slide, it's about digital health capability and how it's expanded so rapidly, in part due to the rollout of the My Health record. So that happened, it's a national electronic health record, and that happened in 2018. It's used now by 90% of Australian citizens. There's also the development of a national health infrastructure to be highly interoperable. So federal and state governments. So we have 3 levels of government in Australia. We're a federation. We have the federal, the state, and then we have local councils. But federal and state are investing in multi-billion-dollar infrastructure programs focused on supply chains, health identifiers, and authentication services. And our regions are working towards this target of comprehensive interoperability with public and private healthcare services by 2022. We've also got a national digital health strategy that sets out priority areas for secure exchange of data, development of new digital services, and the wider use of telehealth. especially to improve access in remote and regional Australia, and that will create opportunities for investment as well. I think we can't touch on remote and rural healthcare solutions without mentioning the Royal Flying Doctor Service. So if you don't know, one to look up, one of the largest and most comprehensive aeromedical organisations globally, and we're really proud to say they provide extensive primary and emergency care across what is a pretty vast country of Australia. So here it's about our clinical trials environment, which I know is known to a number of you. We have more than 37 clinical trials networks in the country, also quality clinical data available and biobanks. I think what you can see on this slide is the strong presence of MNCs, and interesting to note that 30% of our industry-led clinical trials are sponsored by MNCs, the multinational corporations. We've got fast development times, and I mentioned earlier that multicultural population that is really of benefit in this sector. Data generated in Australian clinical trials is accepted in key offshore jurisdictions, so in the US with the FDA, Food and Drugs Administration, and across the EU with the European Medicines Evaluation Agency. One of our fabulous investors, I think, is on the line with us today, and I won't name them, but she did tell us if she could conduct all her clinical trials in Australia, she would. So that was a nice bit of feedback. So on the next slide, just a bit more about the opportunities in the data-driven space. So, if we think about that My Health Record electronic patient record system, the associated databases and the app ecosystem, we're seeing that there are new opportunities for digital innovation. Just a couple to call out: formalising and standardising secure access to patient data, and creating apps that use clinical data to improve and expedite patient care. The Australian Digital Health Agency is the body that maintains My Health Record, and they have a dedicated developer program, and that's open to international companies as well as domestic companies, which is great. So on the next slide, I think we've talked a bit about the digital space, but we did want to say the opportunities are vast, and I think we definitely can't cover them all. But there are opportunities in aged care, telehealth that I mentioned, training, and of course research. Just to call out another fabulous investor that we worked with recently, a great Singaporean company, Homage, digital solution provider in aged care services, and we supported their expansion along with the Victorian government into Melbourne. Okay, so next up, we just wanted to touch on some of the collaboration partners that you might seek to engage with in Australia on the next slide. So CSIRO is our Commonwealth Science Industrial Research Organisation, our national science body, and they're really focused on bringing innovation out of the lab into the market. They currently have a healthcare mission that's looking at challenges from antimicrobial resistance to infectious disease resilience. At the startup and scale-up end of town, there's more than 30 incubators and accelerators in Australia, helping to grow that sort of SME space. MedTech Actuator, who we've worked with closely here in Singapore as well, is Australia's national MedTech accelerator. And on the deep tech side of town, there's Cicada Innovations as well, just to name a couple. Okay, so the next one is about how can we help you, the next slide. So this is always a popular one. So basically, if you don't know, make yourself familiar with the R&D tax incentive, so the research and development tax incentive. It's pretty easy to access tax offset for eligible R&D activities, and really, in particular, beneficial for those of you with a smaller turnover. I think we had one report that showed Australia was 28% cheaper than the US before tax incentives, and 60% cheaper if you included tax incentives for early phase clinical trials. So we can absolutely provide you with more information on that as well. And second is understanding the visa policy environment, and some of the settings have shifted, and there's some really great opportunities actually available now under something called the Global Talent Visa Program. So this is for exceptionally talented individuals and businesses, sort of additional support available to help you, navigate the visa process, fast track processing, fast track to PR in some cases. And it's really about getting that top talent into Australia. And I know that can be a challenge, and one we'll go into with Kathy a bit later. But in particular, this program is looking for individuals in the fields of medtech, biotech, pharma, research, disease management, and health IT. So we can follow up with introductions on that. And a really great part of the Global Talent Visa program is you can talk to an actual person. We can introduce you to one of the directors who are around the world dealing with that program. So on the final bit on this slide is, let us help you. So Austrade has a global network. We're all around the world. I think, 70 offices in many countries. We've got a fantastic team in Australia as well that we work closely with, and also our state and territory counterparts who you're going to hear from shortly. We work really collaboratively with, and that's about helping you, grow your business, but then our economic prosperity together. So that's our details there, and I know we're going to share them later. So do follow up, and we can make sure we can help you. All right, so I think the next two slides are the ones I really wanted to end on, maybe just the next one of the map. Thank you, because I think they really feed into the next part, which is where we're going to do this sort of whip around the country and talk about all of the innovation happening across the country. So I think when you're thinking about where you might land in Australia, the good news is that there's innovation and research and fantastic things happening across the country. But that good news can also mean it's a bit hard to navigate and work out where to land and where's right for you to land. And so I think that's where we find this precinct cluster map is so valuable. They're precincts or technology parks or centres within universities. And I'm sure it's not even a fulsome list, but just so much happening across the whole country. They're government, some of them are private, and we also have PPPs. So, for example, Johnson & Johnson's Innovation Partnering Office in Victoria, it's a PPP between J&J and Monash and the Victorian government, and really a hub for researchers and early stage companies to interact to deliver those novel healthcare solutions. And I'm sure Kathy will share more on this later. So on our final slide, this is really a map of the key sort of biologics organisations, and don't stress about taking a screenshot. We can share this with you as follow-up, but it's really just to show where vaccines, manufacturing, stem cell and gene therapies are happening right across the country. All right, so now I'm really pleased that we've managed to get together a showcase of our states and territories, and so you can hear from them what the opportunities are in each of their jurisdictions. And then I'll be back soon to welcome our special guest, Kathy, and we'll have a conversation about Johnson & Johnson's innovation path in Australia. You just give us a sec, we'll get our video going. Great.
Queensland has one of the best healthcare systems in the world. We are home to world-class health professionals, internationally renowned researchers and state-of-the-art facilities. And now Queensland is bringing COVID-19 testing technologies to the world. Our effective public health system is helping to keep our community safe during these very challenging times.
Queensland has a lot of things to offer. We have fantastic universities, a supporting research structure, but probably most importantly, we have certain challenges which are specific for Queensland. It's remoteness, distances, and this creates clinical problems which are interesting to solve. And with that comes innovation.
We get outcomes. We can complete clinical trials quickly here because we can access the patients. And we really encourage people who wish to learn to come and do things jointly with us. They can take that skill set back home with them, and we will happily collaborate with them through what they do here and on into the future.
Queensland is a destination of choice for clinical trials, research and healthcare education and training. That is why I invite you to work with us. Connect with the bright minds that are part of our health system to deliver better healthcare for our community and yours.
Hello everyone, I am Anne O'Neill. I'm the Director of Enterprise and International Partnerships with the Office for Health and Medical Research in New South Wales Health in Sydney, Australia. So New South Wales has natural strengths in its large and diverse population. It's altruistic and educated, and it's also Australia's largest and strongest economy. We also have Australia's largest and most integrated health system, and it's made up of 223 hospitals that are managed in districts and specialty networks, and we're highly connected through our statewide services such as pathology. We have a mature research ecosystem, an excellent clinical and research workforce. We have strong links to our universities and to non-medical sciences with significant capability in science and engineering and leadership in health data linkage and analytics. New South Wales is also headquarters for many global multinational clinical trial sponsors, and we are a leader in the startup of medical device and health technology companies. And we're home to many internationally recognised companies, and over half of Australia's medical device industry is located in our state. Due to the pandemic in 2020, at the very beginning of it, LA Therapeutics were unable to visit Australia to oversee the trials, which would be the normal way of doing things. However, what we were able to do is facilitate the introduction to local clinical partners, so they're able to undertake those trials here without having a physical presence. They were also impacted by a pause in elective surgery, which happened in many jurisdictions, and a longer wait list when elective surgery was reinstated. What we did in New South Wales was we worked with the trial site, industry partners, and also the policymakers within the Ministry of Health, so that the trial could start within a month of recommencement of non-urgent elective surgery. LA Therapeutics have told us that if they did not run their trial here, they would not have been up and running and completed. And they said that they were blown away by the quality of the clinical trial system in New South Wales and the ease in which they were able to navigate the funding landscape and health system.
Hi, I'm Professor Peter Clinken. I'm the Chief Scientist of Western Australia. My own research interests in the biomedical area included understanding the genes that can go wrong in cancers, particularly blood cancers like leukemias and lymphomas. Western Australia has an excellent health system. Over the last 7 years, it's had 2 new hospitals built. These are state-of-the-art hospitals: Fiona Stanley Hospital, which is an adult tertiary hospital, and the Perth Children's Hospital. Western Australia has the fastest growing life sciences ecosystem in Australia, with over 200 companies now listed here in Western Australia. A few years ago, Perth was ranked 17th in the world as a life science hub. In addition, the state government has created the Future Health Research and Innovation Fund. This is a $1.4 billion fund to promote health and medical research and innovation in Western Australia, as well as a $100 million investment attraction and new industries fund. So 18 months ago, when COVID first hit, I was incredibly amazed by the local capability here in Western Australia, which was able to pivot to make PPE, sanitizers, and incredibly 4 different types of ventilators. Now, we didn't need to use them, fortunately, but we had the capability to make them here in Western Australia. Quite excitingly, a number of companies developed to create new tests. For example, Alkalizer has developed a rapid antigen test. Avicena, using incredible robotics, have developed a rapid PCR test. And Bioterm have developed a rapid antibody screening test. So out of the difficulties and the challenges that we faced in COVID, some incredible opportunities have emerged.
Darwin, the capital of Australia's Northern Territory, is already home to 2 major health centres. The Menzies School of Health Research is one of Australia's leading medical institutes. It's a global leader in tropical health research into life-threatening diseases like malaria, melioidosis, and tuberculosis. Darwin is also where you'll find the National Critical Care and Trauma Centre, a key element in the Australian government's capability to respond to sudden health emergencies in Australia and across Southeast Asia. We also have a growing cluster of health innovation and manufacturing activity, from face masks, wearable respiratory aids, next generation wound care, and worker safety monitoring equipment. Darwin offers an unmatched location, only 4 hours direct flight from Singapore. In Darwin, you'll enjoy unrivaled access to key decision makers, and you'll benefit from the close collaboration between our university, research institutes, government, local talent, and companies. I invite you to find out why Australia's Northern Territory is the ideal location for your business.
Hello, I'm Daniel Bizignano, Chief Investment Officer of mRNA Victoria, the Victorian Government's agency for supporting the development of the mRNA ecosystem in Victoria. Melbourne, the capital of Victoria, hosts Australia's largest biotech ecosystem. Over the past 2 decades, the state has built global health and biotech capabilities by investing $140 billion in health infrastructure. On the back of this investment, Victoria has developed 22 globally recognised medical research institutes, which employ over 9,000 medical researchers. Victoria has received almost half the nation's medical research funding, over $15 billion in the past 10 years, and has more than 1,500 active clinical trials, more than any location in Australia. Victoria has attracted businesses from all over the world, with over 600 domestic and international medtech and pharma companies in the state. These businesses employ over 90,000 skilled professionals, half the national total, and generate over 60% of the entire country's pharmaceutical exports. Looking forward, major investments by the Victorian Government will drive even greater growth in the future. mRNA Victoria was established this year to lead the growth of Australia's mRNA research, development and manufacturing capability. In the next 5 years, the government will establish a $500 million heart hospital, Australia's first specialist cardiac hospital, a $200 million Centre for Medical Discovery, Australia's only hospital-based biomedical engineering and research centre, and a $650 million Australian Institute for Infectious Diseases, the largest in the Southern Hemisphere. Through our global network of 100 business development professionals, the Victorian Government works one-on-one with market entrants and investors to provide them with end-to-end support, including support to find opportunities and build business cases, locate research partners, suppliers and customers, find suitable sites, secure approvals, provide R&D support for clinical research and commercialization, and support the establishment and growth through the range of grant programs tailored to a specific business. I encourage anyone that's interested in exploring potential investments and partnership opportunities in Victoria to reach out to our local representatives based in Southeast Asia.
Hello, my name is Jackie Wade and I'm the Director of Business and Clinical Development at Aucentra Therapeutics. I'd also like to introduce Professor Shudong Wang. She is the founder and Managing Director of Aucentra and also a Professor of Medicinal Chemistry at the University of South Australia. Professor?
Thank you, Jackie. And I'm very pleased to introduce Aucentra Therapeutics. Aucentra is founded in 2018 with 2 objectives: bring the best drug to cancer patients and take drug discoveries to the global market. The drug must be invented, tried, and exported from Australia. Aucentra addresses the most difficult to treat cancer types. As for examples, our 2 clinical programs, osilociclib target glioblastoma, where sonrotoclax treat acute myeloid leukemia. Glioblastoma is the most aggressive and lethal brain cancer. Osilociclib has 2 main advantages over other drugs in development: higher specificity, thus low off-target toxicity, and a far greater capability to penetrate in the brain. Osilociclib has the potential to revolutionize the current treatment of glioblastoma. Sonrotoclax has been tested in patients with AML. CDK9 dysfunctioning is the hallmark of AML. Sonrotoclax targets CDK9 with high potency and then kill the cancer cells effectively. Sonrotoclax has the potential to provide the new treatment option for AML patients, either as a single agent or in combination with chemotherapy or targeted therapy. Thank you.
Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that sort of tour around Australia and just really a taste of what's on offer in the different jurisdictions. So now I'm so pleased to welcome Kathy Connell to have a conversation. So Kathy is Senior Director of New Ventures, Australia and New Zealand for Johnson & Johnson Innovation. And Kathy's got a clinical background, I think early on in her career in Sydney hospitals, and starting her commercial career as VP of Global Business Development at an Australian biotech company. So well versed in the Australian ecosystem. We know Johnson & Johnson, of course, is one of the largest healthcare companies in the world and probably one of the most diverse. So I imagine a challenge to succinctly describe your remit and value, Kathy, but we're going to ask you anyway to give us a quick overview of Johnson & Johnson, and I guess in particular, Johnson & Johnson Innovation, given that's your remit.
Sure, thanks Amelia, and thanks Christine for inviting me and Johnson & Johnson Innovation to take part in this webinar. I've been really excited about this all day, so I really appreciate the opportunity to share some of the Johnson & Johnson Innovation story with people on the webinar today. I see we have 78 participants, so fantastic showing. So as you said, Amelia, I've been with Johnson & Johnson Innovation for 10 years, based in Sydney, Australia. And my role is to identify early stage assets for consideration of collaboration and investment across our three businesses of medical device, pharmaceuticals, and consumer healthcare. So that's a mouthful, isn't it? That's the most succinct I can be in describing what it is that I do. But as you said, Johnson & Johnson is the largest healthcare company in the world. And we are privileged to deliver just extraordinary healthcare solutions for people across their lifespan. But what that also means is that we have very hungry pipelines, and we are always looking at ways of reinventing those pipelines, of supporting those pipelines, and of course, delivering the next generation of healthcare solutions for people all around the world. Some of those people are patients, some of those people are healthcare consumers, and that they're looking at ways of having longer, healthier, more rewarding lives, I guess, in terms of their abilities to move, their abilities to engage with their communities, to be with their families and so forth. So as part of my role here in Australia, I belong to what's called the innovation centres. And we're a really big company, so of course we have lots of acronyms, but Johnson & Johnson Innovation, JJI, has 4 innovation centres, ICs, which are dotted around the world. There's one in California, there's one in Boston, there's one in London, and there's one in Shanghai. And each of those innovation centres have people like me who are dotted around the geography to help identify those new technologies. And the one in Australia, as I said, I'm based in Sydney, reports through to the California Innovation Centre. Now, as part of the complement of ways in which you can engage with Johnson & Johnson, it ranges all the way from early stage research collaborations, sometimes that's about guidance and advice, through to looking at licensing, looking at venture investments, and of course looking at acquisitions. And all of those things I can say that we have undertaken here in Australia. Part of the ways in which we deliver in Australia, and I was really pleased to see in your presentation that there was a reference to this, is a model that I pioneered called the Johnson & Johnson Innovation Partnering Office. Here comes another acronym, JIPOs. And there's a JIPO in Queensland and there's a JIPO in Victoria. And you might ask, how come? Well, because those are 2 states which are really strong in early stage innovation. They're not unique. And certainly, as you heard from the state leaders around the country, I felt a little bit lonely having known all of those people and not seen them for 2 years. You'll see really fabulous resources around the country, but certainly in Queensland and Victoria, we see very strong innovation ecosystems. And so several years ago, we established our first JIPO at QUT and the second one shortly afterwards at Monash University. So one in Queensland and one in Victoria. And these are hubs whereby we look at ways to engage locally with the innovation ecosystem. So we undertake ecosystem activation, we look at ways to network, to provide mentoring, to provide training, and I guess just connectivity, which at times like this is more important than ever. It's right now, our state borders are closed and our international borders too. But the benefit of having a big company like Johnson & Johnson cemented within the ecosystems is that we can always find a big red door to help people connect with J&J and to look at ways in which we may be able to accelerate the development of those next technologies.
Thanks, and I'm glad to hear that it's not just the government that's dying on acronyms, that it's everyone else. It's so good to hear about the sort of the JIPOs and the sort of focus that you have. But I wonder, you talk about sort of enhancing and extending life, and maybe it's a little bit too about getting innovation out of labs. And I wonder if you could talk through just a little bit more about how you might go about that, or perhaps some tips and tricks.
Yeah, sure. And look, I'm happy to talk about some of the collaborations that we've had too, so that helps to bring it to life.
Maybe an example, yeah.
Yeah, so look, it's certainly true. One of the challenges in all countries, and Australia is no different, is being able to extract that exciting IP from these incredible research institutes and universities, from clinicians working in hospital sectors, certainly as I used to do, being able to extract those ideas, develop those ideas, and to productize them, to create a product that we can, then take on to patients all around the world. So in part through the JIPOs and in part through the extensive networks that we have across Australia, we engage with those researchers, we engage with the tech transfer officers, we engage with the investors, we engage with the government, as ways in which that we can connect with and have an understanding of those research technologies, those programs that are being developed that are strategically aligned with J&J. So I do a lot of webinars like this one, and again, pre-COVID, I might be doing this with a cup of tea or a glass of wine, and we would be talking about what are our strategic areas of priority. And within each of those businesses of medical device, pharmaceuticals, and consumer health, we have specific areas that we prioritize. And if you go to our website, Johnson & Johnson Innovation, if you Google that, you'll find it. There's a pretty good website, and it'll talk you through what are our swim lanes, if you like. Mm-hmm. And much of that is driven by, areas of high unmet need, and also looking at differentiated treatments. So there are some areas where there's treatments are lacking, like Alzheimer's disease. There's no real treatments for Alzheimer's disease that will prevent or curtail the devastating impact of it. There are other areas where there's a lot of treatments, and so we're really looking for those particularly differentiated ones that will be able to make a significant difference in patients' lives. And so part of the work that we undertake with the JIPOs is also to communicate that. And so we might meet frequently with researchers and with academic groups, with biotech companies, medtech companies, and they'll say, look, we're working on this. What do you think? Is this in the wheelhouse of J&J? Do you see this as being something that would be investable, that would potentially really add value to the healthcare systems around the world? And we can give that kind of feedback and say, well, it's a little bit too early right now, but I think if you were to do X, Y, and Z, or if you were to be able to demonstrate this type of data, or this type, you have this kind of evidence as a reason to believe, then we get into a position where we can really have a meaningful exchange of ideas to be able to help accelerate that program through to, to a stage that we could actually work with. So I'll give you a couple of examples of the things that we've done like that. We had a very long-standing relationship with a group at the University of Queensland who had a spin-out company which was called Dendrite, and all of this is in the public domain if you want to have a look at it. And they were developing a new treatment for rheumatoid arthritis. When we first met with the group back in, I think it was 2011, it was pretty early stage. And what we committed to do was to support the development of their treatment to early stage clinical trials, so to move from mice into people. Now that took about 5 or 6 years to get to that point. During that time, we had multiple delegations of our scientific experts come from the US and from elsewhere around the world to Queensland to be able to engage in a really robust exchange of ideas and to be able to support the development of that program. And equally, we invited those researchers to our labs in the US and elsewhere to be able to, meet with our scientists and to think about ways in which they might be able to support the development of their program. Look, I'm really pleased to say that we succeeded in what we said we would do, that we would take this technology through to phase 1 clinical trials. Now, in the end, we elected not to pursue that, partly because our own strategy had changed by the time it had got to the clinical trials. But I think what it's a good example of is the longevity of the relationships. When you've got a really great idea and you've got a fantastic team with whom to work, then there is that opportunity when you're embedded in an ecosystem to be able to support and accelerate those programs. There was a great exchange of ideas. The ideas went both ways. We learned things, and the team through the University of Queensland and Dendrite did as well. And so we were really pleased to be able to support that kind of program. Another example is where we might see, for instance, a clinician-led innovation. And we did this just last year with an orthopaedic surgeon here in Sydney. And what they developed was this very nifty device to be able to help support surgeon decision-making with regards to placement of what's called the cup when undertaking hip revision surgery. Now, most times surgeons will look at it and they'll kind of raise their thumb and say, we think it goes here, and they'll pop it in. And that's great if you're a surgeon that's extremely skilled and does thousands of hip replacements every year. But if you're an early learner, or if you only do the occasional hip replacement, you may not have the thumb and eye coordination to be able to perfectly position the new hip into the structure of the patient's body. What they had developed, seeing that there was this unmet need, again, as I said, surgeon-led invention, and what they had developed was using smartphone technology to be able to simply and rapidly position the new hip into a patient's socket. It's a disposable one-off device, very easy to use, and it's kind of first time every time. Now, the benefit of that was, again, as I said, surgeon-led. So what surgeons see is not just the patient on the table, but when the patient comes back and says, hey, doc, my hip's working really well. Now, sometimes the hip's not working so well because it may not have been placed correctly. And then they have to go back for revision surgery. Now, that's really bad for the patient, and it's bad for the healthcare system. It's bad for everybody. So by having a very simple technology such as this one, this is with a company called Nasbit, we're able to deliver better health outcomes as a consequence of surgery for patients in a fairly simple way. So we're thrilled to be able to collaborate with groups like that. So there are two examples. One where it was a great idea coming out of a university, a little bit early at the time, but able to take it all the way to clinical trials. And then the other very much driven by the observation of this surgeon that, you know, perhaps some of those less experienced surgeons needed to have, you know, a tool to be able to support them in delivering really strong outcomes to their patients.
Yeah, fantastic examples. And I certainly want my hip replacement properly aligned, please, if I have to have one.
Go to
I think, you know, that sort of feedback loop that you talk about is so important, because really, I think, you know, you talked about it earlier, we're getting to that, we want to get to that productization, you know, pathway, right? I mean, that's how it can be of benefit to either patients or consumers, is that they can actually, you know, access it. So that's really valuable. Kathy, I have to ask, you know, why Australia? So I know, you know, you're Australian, but Johnson & Johnson is a global company. And so, you know, what is it about Australia that's attractive to J&J Innovation or JJI?
Look, what's not attractive is the easy way to say it. I was actually reflecting on your presentation at the beginning, Amelia, when you said that there was a vast majority of people in Australia who either were migrants themselves or first-generation migrants, and I fall into that child of first generation. So my parents were English migrants, and you know, I think that if you don't know Australia, but worse, if you don't understand the global innovation ecosystem, you'd ask that question. But Australia is consistently ranked in the top 10 most innovative countries in the world, oftentimes in the top 5 most innovative. I think there are a few reasons to that. One is that there has been generally bipartisan support of innovation from various governments at federal and state level for many, many years. And as a consequence, innovation is valued in the country, and there are some fantastic mechanisms to be able to support it. One of the obvious one is the Medical Research Futures Fund, which is a $20 billion endowment fund, that is specifically designed to be able to support the translation of medical research into those great next products. That's been a huge benefit for Australia, and to be able to support extraction of that innovation, if you like. You talked about some of the other infrastructure elements, and I think the R&D tax credit is a really strong one. And I think there's really fabulous infrastructure here. But something I think sometimes people don't take into account is the tyranny of distance and the benefit of the tyranny of distance. So one of the tyranny of distance benefits is that if you don't have it, you're going to have to make it up. And that's kind of the culture of Australia, because it's not so easy to pop across to a country that's an hour's flight away. You know, if I fly an hour from where I'm sitting right now, I am in the same state that I am sitting right now. So I think we see a great entrepreneurial spirit that exists in Australia, and there is a really strong educational background and a hospital background that backs it up. So I think combined with a culture of innovation, with strong infrastructure, fabulous education, and great hospital sector where you can actually trial out these ideas, it's almost like the perfect positive storm of innovation. When Johnson & Johnson Innovation was established in 2011, there were only 3 innovation centres. So remember I said there were 4. At that time, there was only 3. They were in California, they were in Boston, they were in London. But there were 2 satellites. One of the satellites was Israel, and the other satellite was Australia. Yeah. And again, as I said, it was really that recognition and the track history that Australia had of converting great ideas into really fabulous technologies. You spoke about some of them, but there are literally hundreds. And I think we see a fabulous talent pool. It's also a nice place to live. So if you listened in carefully, particularly to the Queensland video, there was an awful lot of non-Australian accents that were speaking right then. And I think, you know, you have a couple of thought leaders who come internationally to Australia. They bring other thought leaders as well. And it's, you know, quite a nice place to live, especially when we're not in lockdown. But I think, you know, all of the benefits that we've talked about before help to catalyse a very vibrant innovation ecosystem. And there are the infrastructure and financial supports to be able to accelerate it.
Yeah, and thanks, Kathy. We'll get you on a billboard or a T-shirt or something selling Australian innovation. But look, we know it's not all easy, and I think some of the benefits also are challenges if you flip the coin over as well. And so, you know, that I think, you know, you touched on tyranny of distance, which can be a challenge, but I think you've, you know, put it so well in terms of an opportunity as well. But maybe if you think through what might be some of the challenges that make it a bit tougher in Australia.
Yeah, look, I think, I mean, to everyone who's listening in, I was saying to Amelia that I've been on the phone since 5:30 this morning, and right now it's 5:45 at night. So one of the challenges is not only that tyranny of distance, but the time zones, and they can be pretty brutal. I put the positive spin on it. It means that if you're an international company and you're looking to undertake research or clinical trials here, it does mean your company pretty much gets a 24/7 workforce. You get your workforce in your own country, and you get all of us whilst you're sleeping, trudging away as well. So it can't be understated, but it also doesn't need to be the absolute obstacle of it. I think, you know, one of the other areas is that the isolation of Australia from the rest of the world, and especially at times like this, can make networking and exchange of ideas more difficult. Webinars are great, you know, and I really applaud this particular webinar, and I know you've done a series, and we've done a series of webinars as well. But let's face it, most of us are getting a little bit zoomed out. And I bet there's 1 or 2 of you doing your exercise bike right now to try and finish off your day and, you know, keep yourself going. And if you're listening to this recording, you might have even put me on double speed just to get through it real quick. So, you know, I think we do see that isolation as being troublesome. You know, some of the best ideas happen literally when you're standing in line to get a coffee. You know, one of our greatest collaboration stories was that we had a pain researcher from J&J standing in line at Starbucks, God knows why, to get a coffee. And there was a pain researcher from Queensland standing in the same line immediately in front, really long time. What do you do? What do you do? I like looking at spiders and whether or not they're able to, mitigate, their venom can mitigate pain. Our person said, yeah, that's fantastic. I like doing that too. And we had a great collaboration that happened. Now, you don't get that incidental engagement over Zoom, and that's where networking at conferences is just golden. However, I think in the absence of being able to do that, there are lots of mechanisms. You're doing it through these kinds of programs. We do it as well. We do a lot of global challenges. It's not just Australia that's isolated, right? There's lots of other countries that have trouble too. So we do a lot of global challenges where we really do a call for proposals to help support shake out of the tree some of those technologies that may not necessarily be sitting in North America and in easy time zones.
Yeah, and I think use us as well, for that connectivity piece. It's, we're able to, maybe get you on a WebEx or a Zoom, and I know it's a bit fatiguing, but, in advance of getting on those planes, which I think will be so good. And I think we'll forgive those researchers for having Starbucks coffee if they can come up with some wonderful connectivity, Kathy.
I've got to come up with other thing, Starbucks.
Yeah. The other thing I know, you and I had talked previously about talent, and so just wanted to briefly mention again that global talent visa program, because I think that can be a challenge, and mobility is a challenge at the moment, we know, for everyone. But also, there are great pools of talent, but sometimes you want to bring your top researcher in, or you want to bring in a team of someone. And so just would encourage people to, learn more about that program, because particularly in this healthcare space, we are looking for those people in that sort of, exceptional talent category.
Amelia, look, I know I was meant to talk about that, so I'm sorry I forgot that bit, but which of course tells you all of this is spontaneous. But actually, I think that is such a fantastic program, and it's so desperately needed. There can be a real challenge in the talent pool in Australia, particularly when it comes to executive talent. So running these biotech businesses, we've got great researchers, they really are phenomenal, and we've got great clinicians too. But we are a little slim in terms of a big talent pool to be able to run these companies that have the experience of working in companies, say, like Johnson & Johnson, because we don't have our research pool here in Australia. So I think any mechanism that you can deploy to be able to make it easier for that executive talent to come to Australia, to impart their learnings, their experience, and also to share their global networks, it just has to be applauded. And I for one really do applaud you on that.
Yeah, thank you. And so I guess, what about, thinking about advice you might give companies? They're thinking about coming to Australia, maybe it's investment, maybe it's research, maybe it's BD. There's some sort of, top things you'd want them to consider, or any advice you'd like to impart, Kathy?
Yeah, so look, I've had the privilege of meeting with lots of biotech companies that have chosen to locate in Australia. And I really applaud them for doing that for lots of reasons. One, it's brave, right? It's brave to come to a new country, regardless of what your company business might be. It's really important, as quickly as you possibly can, is to do a landscape of the country and work out which is going to be the right place for you and for your technology to be able to succeed. Not all states have the same benefits with regards to particular technologies. Some states are really good in pharmaceuticals, others are better in medical devices, others are better in digital health. So I think engaging with people like yourself, Amelia, will be really important to have a sense of, well, what are your actual needs? What's the stage of development? And then where would be the best fit for you? Think also about the cost of living, right? The cost of living in Australia is not cheap. And that can also have an impact on how you're thinking about your startup. So again, it depends on the stage of development. But equally, if you're at a stage of development where you're really needing to attract finance, you're probably going to need to go to one of the big cities, just because that's an easier engagement. So my top tip is do research. Don't just land in a capital city because you've heard about it or you like the idea of the, of the infrastructure or the, you know, the tourist attractions. I'm trying not to point at any in particular, but, you know, really think carefully, as you would with any other country, as to, you know, what can that state or city offer you? You know, what talent is available, what infrastructure is available, you know, what additional state government financial support is available, and make those kinds of decisions. I think my other top tip would be get embedded in your innovation ecosystem as quickly as you can, and have someone local who knows the scene to be able to support you. Now, that again might be using someone from Austrade, someone from, say, AusBiotech, which is the National Industry Association. There are state-based industry associations as well, Bio-Melbourne Network, Life Sciences Queensland, Bioinnovation South Australia. But I would get embedded in those kinds of groups so that they can help direct you to the right resources, the right contacts, the right people to be able to support, you know, your efforts going ahead. Because ultimately we want you to be successful. You know, we want you to be successful because you're working on something that's really important. It's not just important for Australia, but it will no doubt be important for people all around the world. And as the founder of Janssen says many, many times, patients are waiting. So we don't have time to dilly-dally.
Oh, that's a fantastic saying. And I think, you know, it's so true, like you say, don't have to start from zero. You know, these networks exist, this research exists. So let us help you connect with that. And there's so much information available that we can, you know, fast track so that, you know, once you land, you're not starting from scratch. Kathy, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure having you on our webinar and really sharing all your experience with Australia and with Johnson & Johnson's innovation partnership. I think it'll be so valuable to our partners who have joined us today just to hear your experience. So thank you so much. I know Christine is going to wrap us up, but just a couple of thank yous from me to Christine and Nishan and her team at APAC Med, who have been, you know, fantastic in getting us all together today. And also my Austrade team, Diana, Dilla, Kath, who put in the hard work to make sure we had a productive session today. So thanks to you all for joining. This is how you can contact us through the website or through the email. And we're happy to follow up with any questions or connect you with people, either our teams in Australia, Europe, Singapore, across ASEAN. So thanks so much, and I'll hand back to you, Christine.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much for the inspiring stories and opportunities for our innovators that are tuning in today. I think that was a great session that we all thoroughly enjoyed. So just before I end, you know, APAC Med's startup program strives to nurture medtech startups to drive innovation and to develop life-changing technologies in the entire medtech ecosystem. So please look out for more exciting webinars coming up for the rest of this year. And really today, I'd like to thank all of you for tuning in, all our guests who have come and enjoyed the session as well. And of course, to our panel speakers, Amelia, yourself, and of course, Kathy, both of you are such a natural show host yourself on the session, in the session itself, and all of your time for and your participation. So take care, and we'll see you soon in our next webinar. Yeah, have a great week ahead. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Right.